Hello. Today I am having uh, a dish that I had before, but before I had it as on the show on this channel, I had it as a like stir fried noodle dish. But this time I just got it as a dish by itself with some rice. It was a bit expensive from the shop, and I was wondering why it cost so much. But I think that's because I didn't realize I was ordering family sized portions. Like this is a huge tray of this, and the rice is a huge thing of rice too. So this might be my meal for a couple meals. I don't think I'll be able to eat all of this in one sitting. Um, but this is a dish called Yu Xiang Rosa, and so Yu Xiang Yu is fish, Xiang means fragrant. And so yuxiang means like fish flavored. It refers to the sauce. The sauce I think has some kind of fish sauce in it. It doesn't taste like fish at all. So like it's not the name is not really accurate to the flavor of the dish. It's more like a sweet and spicy kind of sauce. Um, but the name of it is called fish sauce, like yuxiang. And then ro means meat, and se means strips, so like strips of meat. And uh, the typical way to make this dish is you get several different kinds of veggies that you all julienne up into strips, and you cut the meat up into strips, and then you just kind of stir fry them all together in this sauce. The typical things, it's made with pork, usually. Some halal restaurants, like Muslim restaurants, will. So there's two kinds of Muslims in China, I mean there are other kinds of Muslims as well, but there's two sort of main ethnicities of Muslims. There are Xinjiang people who are from the province called Xinjiang. They're from the west, and then there are and they're ethnically more similar to sort of Central Asian kind of like Kazakh people and things like that. And then there are Hui Muslims. And Hui is an ethnicity of Muslims that are actually just very similar ethnically to Han Chinese, but they're Muslim. And they've sort of like integrated more into Chinese sort of culture and traditions, but they still practice Islam. Uh, they have quite a few other cultural differences from sort of the standard Han Chinese culture and ethnicity, but in general, they're a little more sinicized than the Xinjiang Muslims. So at Hui restaurants that are halal as well, they will often have a lot of the same dishes food wise that you get in standard Chinese cooking, but they'll cook it in halal ways. Like they won't use pork, things like that. So like you can get this dish at halal Hui restaurants made from beef or made from chicken. But the typical way at just a standard Chinese restaurant is made with pork. And then they usually use three veggies. They'll have carrots, these type of mushrooms, which are called tree ear mushrooms, muar. So mu means tree and or wood, and means ear. So muar is tree ear mushrooms. And then the last veggie that is usually used in this is green pepper. It's not so. There's a type of large green pepper that's common in China. That's not a bell pepper. It's a little spicier than a bell pepper. It has a similar that kind of green pepper flavor that a green bell pepper has. The sort of I call it kind of a grassy flavor. It has that flavor, but it's a little spicier than a typical bell pepper. But maybe not as spicy as like what we usually consider like spicy peppers. But it definitely adds a little bit of spice to things. And so like typically that pepper. They'll use it as pepper in all sorts. They use it on all sorts of dishes. And in this one, they'll chop it up into strips. But I'm not a big fan of that green pepper flavor that I mentioned. And so when I order this, I just ask them not to put it in. So I just get it with carrots and the mushrooms, the tree mushrooms, and the pork. And then it's got this kind of you can kind of see from the bottom, like it's a reddish. It's a little spicy. It's not usually. Sometimes this dish can be very spicy, but usually it's not particular. It's like just mildly spicy, and then quite sweet. So, and then to go with this, I got some fried rice. In a previous video, I got a dish with some Yangzhou fried rice, which is a very common style of fried rice. But this time I decided to get a different one. This kind of fried rice is called soy sauce fried rice, or soy sauce is called jiangyou. Jiang means sauce, and you means oil. But in this case, it doesn't mean oil. It means like jiangyou. Those two characters together mean soy. What we in the West we call soy sauce, or and so like this is just a rice that's been stir fried with a bunch of soy sauce. It has a strong soy sauce flavor. And I think it's got like a few chives or whatever in it. Or scallions or something. But there's not really any other stuff in the... Well, I think they might have mixed in a bit of egg. I think it's got a bit of egg mixed in and the rice. But like... unlike a lot of other kind of fried rice dishes... It doesn't have any other stuff added. It doesn't have any veggies or meat or anything added. It's just a bit of egg to hold it all together and soy sauce. A whole bunch of soy sauce, to the point where, the rice turns brown. And that's just another style. Like I said in the previous video, there's a whole bunch of styles of fried rice that you can get. Most restaurants will have 2 or 3 different, if they have fried rice, they'll have 2 or 3 different variations you can get. The biggest range of variation is when you start getting just dishes stir-fried with rice, which restaurants that tend to do that tend to specialize in that. So it'll be like a thing that their specialty is that they do stir fry rice dishes, and what they'll be doing is taking dishes like this thing I've got, and they stir fry the rice with those. And you can get pretty much any traditional kind of Chinese dishes as a fried rice with that dish stir fried with rice. But that's kind of outside the bounds of just traditional like fried rice. Within fried rice, there are probably, there are quite a few other variations that are not a dish stir fried with rice, but are actually specific kinds of fried rice. And most restaurants that have serve dishes like this will have the option to just get a side of plain rice, or they'll usually have 1 or 2, maybe 3 other like stir-fried rice options. Like the restaurant I ordered from today had that Yangzhou fried rice, and they had the soy sauce fried rice, and they had regular rice. There's some other variations you can get. There's a couple other variations that are regional. So they're named after a region. And specifically have certain ingredients based on that region. And then there are a few ones that like, there's one that's just rice with egg. That'll be called egg fried rice. That one you can find in America also quite often. And The other options that you can get are slipping my mind, but there are probably around between 5 and 10 different sort of standard variations of fried rice that you'll find commonly in restaurants. And most restaurants won't have all of those. They'll have, like this one had two different ones, but most restaurants will have a few of those, and then they'll have dishes that you can get to have, and you can have that with that. Um, Typically, the idea of what I'm doing here, where I'm putting the dish on the fried rice and eating it, that's a fairly American thing to do. Um, some Chinese people might do that, but typically, if you're getting fried rice, you're just eating that separately, plain, and then you'll have the dish separately. And if you get plain rice, you put the dish on the rice and eat it together. But with fried rice, some people will still do that. But from my experience, that's not as common. Like with Westerners, if you got fried rice with a dish, you eat it together, and people always do that. Whereas with Chinese people, that's not as common of a thing to do. It still happens. Like it's not unheard of, but it's just not the most common way to do it. But I quite like the mix of flavors, so I just do that. When I ordered this today, I was wondering why it was so, like, it was very expensive. Probably about double the price of what I would normally expect to pay. In total, but the pictures look, I've never ordered from this restaurant, but the pictures looked good, and the rating on the app was good, so I figured I'd give it a try. And as I found out now, the reason the prices were more expensive is not because they're overcharging you or anything. It's because they're giving you double the portion size. This is easily twice as much as you would get normally. So I don't think they're overpriced at all. I think it's just this place is just giving you more. They don't have a small option. You just get the big option. But that's fine. This kind of thing, it easily will last and make leftovers. So I'll probably eat, a third or a half of this for lunch today, and then I'll probably just let it sit out and then eat it again for dinner. It'll still be good even if it's room temperature or whatever. If I want it hot, like you can microwave this back up to heat and kind of just have it microwaved or whatever. Also, these are two really good things. You can just let the rice sit out and dry out a little bit more and then re-stir fry it. And this dish goes really well stir-fried with rice. So, that's a common way to use leftovers of dishes, is you have a bit of the dish, and then, you eat it one day. The next day, you can just stir-fry it together with some rice, and it'll be a whole nother dish. So I might do that. I might just eat it by itself later for dinner. If I'm lazy, I won't do any extra cooking. I'll just eat it room temperature. It still tastes good. But if you want a little variety, like this it goes well with the rice, and it changes the flavor a little bit if you stir fry it up with the rice. And it feels like you're eating a slightly different dish. So sometimes when I get things like this where they've given me way too much food, I'll do that. Just to kind of leftover stir fry. There are quite a few other ways you can handle this kind of thing. Another thing I know some people do, this isn't as common, but the steamed buns that people eat here, called baozi, you can easily use your leftovers. If you have the dough for the baozi, you can use your leftovers and just make Baozi using whatever like dishes you have as leftovers. You can just stick those in, and they like steam up pretty quick. Um, and the dough for that's not very hard to make. So like sometimes you can do that, something like that. Um, if you've got noodles, like I had that dish before that was this stir fried with noodles. Like you can do a noodle stir fry. There's a whole bunch of sort of ingenious little ways to use leftovers with specifically with these kind of saucy dishes that are typical of Chinese food. Um, like even you could do all sorts of things with bread, like make a sandwich out of this. Like I still have, I think in a previous video I had that Russian style bread. I have often used this dish specifically, and I'll get a loaf of that bread and like cut it open and just put a bunch of this in and have like a sandwich of it. And that makes quite a good leftover meal as well. So there's a lot of things you can do with the like when you if you order a dish like this and there's way too much, or if you make it at home. Like I can make this dish fairly easily. Like I know how to make it, but the the reason I don't often make food at home is because you make so much. Like it's nearly impossible to make like a single serving of it. And as someone who's like living by themselves, if you make a giant pot of something, I tend to not want to just eat the same thing over and over for like 4 or 5 meals in a row. So I find that I always end up making way too much food when I cook for myself. So often I'll order delivery because it's usually portioned for a single person to eat, a serving. This time was a little unexpected. I was not expecting it to be quite so much. So like in this situation, I'll figure some way out to use the leftovers of it. But typically, I like having a different thing for each meal. So like I'll try and like get single serving portions, and it's a lot easier to do that as um, to go like get takeout and things. Like they portion things a lot better than if I'm like cooking for myself. I'll end up with way too large of portions. Um, I think that's all I have to say about this. So I'll cut the video off, and I'll see y'all on the next one.